In the heart of a sprawling, otherworldly kingdom called Eldoria, where crystal spires reached for the heavens and rivers glimmered with liquid starlight, there existed an age-old tradition that bound its people to duty above all else. The royal family ruled with wisdom and grace, their lineage stretching back through centuries of peace, prosperity, and whispered legends. At the center of this grand tapestry was Princess Serafina, a young woman whose beauty was matched only by her fierce determination to carve her own path in life. Serafina had grown up surrounded by opulence, but yearned for something more meaningful than the gilded cage she called home. She often wandered the palace gardens at night, gazing at the stars and dreaming of adventures beyond the confines of her royal obligations. Her curiosity about the world outside the palace walls led her to sneak out on occasion, disguised as a commoner, eager to experience the lives of those who served under her family's rule. One fateful evening, during one such escapade, Serafina stumbled upon a figure unlike any she had ever encountered. He was tall and broad-shouldered, clad in simple yet sturdy armor that bore no insignia or emblem, a stark contrast to the ornate designs worn by the palace guards. His name was Arlen, a human man tasked with patrolling the outer perimeter of Eldoria's capital city. Unlike most humans, whose presence in Eldoria was rare due to the planet's strict immigration policies, Arlen had been granted permission to stay after proving himself invaluable during a border skirmish months prior. Arlen stood apart from others not just because of his origins but also because of his demeanor. While many soldiers carried themselves with rigid formality, Arlen exuded warmth and humility. His laughter echoed often among the streets he guarded, earning him the affection of the townsfolk. It wasn't long before rumors of this human protector reached the ears of the palace servants, and eventually, Serafina herself. Their first meeting happened entirely by chance. Serafina, cloaked in a hooded robe, had wandered too far into the market district. When a group of rowdy traders began arguing loudly nearby, causing panic among the crowd, she found herself jostled and nearly knocked off her feet. Before she could steady herself, a strong hand caught her arm, pulling her safely aside. Looking up, she met Arlen's piercing blue eyes, which softened immediately upon realizing whom he had saved. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and steady. For a moment, Serafina forgot how to speak. There was something disarming about him, his sincerity, perhaps, or the way he seemed utterly unaware of her true identity. Instead of replying, she simply nodded, tugging her hood further over her face. But Arlen didn't let go right away. Instead, he offered her a small, crooked smile that made her stomach flutter inexplicably. "I haven't seen you around here before," he said lightly. "You must be new." "Something like that," Serafina replied, her tone measured despite the storm brewing inside her. For reasons she couldn't explain, she didn't want the moment to end. And so, against every ounce of caution ingrained in her since birth, she lingered, engaging him in conversation under the guise of being a traveler passing through. Over the weeks that followed, their paths crossed again and again. Sometimes it was deliberate on Serafina's part, other times, it felt almost fated. They would talk late into the night, sitting atop the ancient stone wall that encircled the city, sharing stories of their respective worlds. Arlen spoke of Earth, a place vastly different from Eldoria, where technology reigned supreme and magic was nothing more than myth. In turn, Serafina regaled him with tales of her homeland, its enchanted forests, sentient creatures, and the delicate balance between nature and civilization. What started as innocent exchanges soon blossomed into something deeper. Arlen admired Serafina's wit and courage, qualities she rarely revealed within the stifling confines of the palace. Likewise, Serafina found solace in Arlen's unwavering honesty and genuine kindness. Their connection transcended boundaries of species and station, forging a bond neither could ignore. But theirs was a love destined to face formidable obstacles. Word of their clandestine meetings eventually reached the ears of Queen Lysandra, Serafina's mother and ruler of Eldoria. Known for her ironclad resolve and unyielding adherence to tradition, the queen viewed Arlen as a threat to both her daughter's future and the stability of the realm. Humans were outsiders, unpredictable and uncontrollable, anathema to the carefully orchestrated alliances that sustained Eldoria's power. Summoning Serafina to the throne room one afternoon, Queen Lysandra confronted her daughter with steely composure. "I have heard troubling reports, my child," she began, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "Reports of your association with the human guard. Is this true?" Serafina hesitated, torn between defiance and duty. Finally, she lifted her chin and met her mother's gaze. "Yes, Mother. I have spoken with him. He is different from what we've been taught to believe." The Queen's expression darkened. "Different? He is a foreigner, Serafina. An anomaly tolerated only because of necessity. You are a princess of Eldoria, bound by duty to uphold our laws and traditions. Your actions jeopardize everything we stand for." Despite her mother's stern rebuke, Serafina refused to sever ties with Arlen. Their meetings became even more secretive, hidden beneath layers of deception and careful planning. Yet the strain of living a double life weighed heavily on her. Each stolen moment with Arlen filled her with joy, but the constant fear of discovery left her perpetually on edge. Meanwhile, whispers of discontent spread throughout the palace. Advisors muttered behind closed doors, warning of potential rebellion should news of the princess's forbidden relationship reach the public. Even members of the royal guard grew wary, casting suspicious glances at Arlen whenever their paths crossed. Though he remained oblivious to the full extent of the scrutiny, Arlen sensed a growing tension in the air, a quiet hostility that followed him wherever he went. Then came the day when everything changed. As Serafina prepared for yet another covert rendezvous, she received word that her father, King Alden, had fallen gravely ill. Rushing to his bedside, she found him pale and weak, his once mighty frame diminished by illness. Clutching her hand, he spoke softly, urging her to remain steadfast in her duties. "You are the future of Eldoria, my dear," he said, his voice trembling. "Do not allow fleeting desires to cloud your judgment. Our people depend on you." Tears streamed down Serafina's face as she promised to honor his wishes. Yet deep within her heart, she knew she could never abandon Arlen, not without a fight. Later that evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, Serafina ventured to their usual meeting spot near the city gates. But instead of finding Arlen waiting for her, she discovered him surrounded by a group of armed guards. Their leader, Captain Valen, sneered down at him, his sword drawn. "This is your final warning, human," Valen spat. "Stay away from the princess, or face the consequences." Arlen stood his ground, though his fists clenched tightly at his sides. "I mean no harm to anyone," he said evenly. "Least of all Serafina." Before the situation could escalate further, Serafina stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and commanding. "Enough!" she cried, startling everyone present. Striding toward Arlen, she grabbed his hand firmly and looked up at him with fiery resolve. "Run!" she whispered urgently. Without hesitation, they turned and fled together, disappearing into the shadows of the night. Behind them, chaos erupted. Guards shouted orders, swords clashed, and alarms blared throughout the city. But Serafina and Arlen pressed onward, their hearts pounding in unison as they raced toward an uncertain future. For the first time, Serafina felt truly free, untethered from the expectations and restrictions that had defined her life thus far. Yet she knew their journey was far from over. Ahead lay untold dangers, challenges that would test their love and resilience to the breaking point. As they disappeared into the dense forest surrounding Eldoria's capital, the stars above seemed brighter than ever, casting an ethereal glow over their path. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of energy barriers hinted at the advanced technology guarding the kingdom's borders. Arlen slowed momentarily, glancing back at the rapidly receding lights of the city. "Where do we go now?" he asked, breathless but determined. Serafina squeezed his hand tighter, her mind racing with possibilities. "There's a place," she murmured, her voice tinged with both hope and apprehension. "An old sanctuary deep in the woods. Few know of it. It's where my ancestors used to retreat when they needed refuge. If we can make it there, we'll have a chance to regroup." They moved swiftly, weaving through towering trees whose branches shimmered with bioluminescent moss. The air grew cooler as they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the sounds of pursuit fading into the background. Still, neither dared to relax completely. Every rustle of leaves, every distant call of nocturnal creatures set their nerves on edge. Time seemed to blur as they pushed forward, guided by instinct and Serafina's intimate knowledge of the terrain. Hours later, exhaustion finally forced them to pause beside a crystalline stream. Its waters sparkled faintly, reflecting the light of the twin moons overhead. Arlen knelt to splash water on his face, while Serafina leaned against a tree, closing her eyes briefly. Despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, she couldn't shake the weight of what they had done, or the realization that there was no turning back. "You must think I'm crazy," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her tone was lighter than expected, almost teasing, though her words carried undeniable gravity. Arlen chuckled softly, shaking droplets from his fingers. "Crazy? No. Brave? Definitely." He turned to look at her, his expression softening. "You gave up everything for me tonight. I don't know if I'll ever deserve that kind of trust." Serafina smiled wryly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's not just about you, Arlen. It's about freedom, the kind I've always dreamed of but never thought possible. Being with you makes me feel alive in ways I can't explain. If that means running away from my crown, so be it." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Arlen opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a sharp crack echoed through the forest. Both froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Another sound followed, a mechanical whirring, unmistakably artificial. Peering cautiously through the foliage, they spotted a squadron of drones hovering above the treetops, their sensors scanning the area with relentless precision. "They're tracking us," Serafina whispered, her pulse quickening. "Mother must have activated the surveillance grid." Without wasting another second, they resumed their frantic dash, zigzagging through the underbrush to avoid detection. The drones' movements became erratic, homing in on their location. Just as one swooped dangerously close, Arlen grabbed a fallen branch and hurled it upward, striking the machine squarely. Sparks flew as the drone spiraled downward, crashing into the earth with a deafening explosion. "That won't hold them off for long," he muttered grimly, already scanning for the next threat. Serafina nodded, her mind racing. "We need cover, something to mask our heat signatures. The caves aren't far from here." They sprinted toward a jagged cliffside looming ahead, its surface riddled with dark openings. Ducking into the nearest cavern, they plunged into darkness, the cool air offering a brief respite from the chaos outside. Arlen pulled out a small flashlight he kept strapped to his belt, illuminating the narrow passage. Stalactites dripped moisture onto the rocky floor, and the faint scent of minerals filled the air. "This might work," Serafina said, her voice barely audible. "These tunnels lead to the sanctuary. But we'll have to move quickly, they'll send search parties soon." As they navigated the labyrinthine network of caves, their footsteps echoed eerily against the walls. The oppressive stillness was occasionally broken by the distant rumble of collapsing rock, likely triggered by the drones attempting to flush them out. Each step brought new challenges: slippery surfaces, sudden drops, and passages so narrow they had to squeeze through sideways. Yet despite the danger, a strange sense of camaraderie settled over them. They moved as one, trusting each other implicitly, their shared goal binding them closer than ever. At last, they emerged into a vast underground chamber bathed in the soft glow of luminescent fungi. Towering stone pillars supported the ceiling high above, carved with intricate runes that pulsed faintly with magical energy. In the center of the room stood a pedestal holding an ancient artifact, a glowing orb that radiated warmth and calm. This was the heart of Eldoria, a relic said to embody the spirit of the land itself. Serafina approached the orb reverently, placing a hand on its smooth surface. A surge of power coursed through her, filling her with renewed strength and clarity. "This will protect us for now," she said, turning to Arlen. "But we can't stay here forever. We need a plan." Arlen nodded, his jaw tightening with determination. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." Unbeknownst to them, however, their actions had already set off a chain reaction far beyond Eldoria's borders. News of the princess's escape reached neighboring kingdoms, sparking debates and alliances that threatened to destabilize the entire region. Meanwhile, back in the palace, Queen Lysandra wrestled with conflicting emotions, pride in her daughter's boldness clashing with fear for the future of her people. And somewhere in the depths of space, a fleet of ships powered by alien technology began charting a course toward Eldoria. The message they carried was simple yet chilling: retrieve the princess, or destroy her. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Serafina and Arlen sat side by side near the entrance of the sanctuary, watching the first rays of sunlight filter through cracks in the cave ceiling. Neither had slept. The events of the previous night replayed endlessly in their minds, each detail sharpened by adrenaline and uncertainty. Yet amidst the turmoil, a fragile sense of peace settled over them. For the first time in what felt like ages, they allowed themselves a moment to breathe, to simply exist without the immediate pressure of survival. "So," Arlen said, breaking the silence with a light-hearted grin, "what happens when a princess runs away? Do they send knights in shining armor after her, or is it more like angry bureaucrats with clipboards?" Serafina laughed despite herself, the sound echoing softly in the cavernous space. "Oh, it's much worse than that. They'll probably send an army, and then lecture me about fiscal responsibility once they catch us." Her attempt at humor masked the underlying tension, but Arlen saw through it easily. Leaning closer, he rested a hand on hers. "Hey, whatever comes next, we'll handle it. Together." She met his gaze, her violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I just wish I knew whether I'm doing the right thing. Leaving my family, my people. It feels selfish, doesn't it?" "It doesn't," Arlen replied firmly. "You're fighting for something bigger than yourself, for the chance to live authentically, without being crushed under the weight of expectations. That's not selfish, it's brave. Besides—" He paused, his expression softening. "If anyone deserves happiness, it's you." The sincerity in his voice brought fresh tears to her eyes, though this time they weren't born of fear or doubt. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to build a life together, no matter how impossible it seemed. But reality had a way of intruding, even in moments of quiet reflection. A low rumble shook the ground beneath them, followed by a series of sharp cracks that reverberated through the sanctuary. Instinctively, they sprang to their feet, scanning the chamber for signs of danger. The heart of Eldoria pulsed erratically, its glow flickering as though responding to some unseen force. "What's happening?" Arlen asked, his voice tense. "I don't know," Serafina admitted, stepping toward the artifact. "The heart shouldn't react like this unless—" Her words trailed off as realization dawned. "Unless someone's tampering with Eldoria's protective barrier. Someone powerful." Before either could process the implications, a deafening boom echoed through the tunnels, accompanied by the unmistakable hum of advanced machinery. The drones hadn't given up, they'd merely regrouped, and now they were closing in fast. Worse still, the vibration suggested reinforcements. Mechanized units capable of breaching even the most fortified defenses. "We need to move," Arlen urged, grabbing her arm. "Now." They bolted deeper into the sanctuary, following a winding passage that sloped steadily upward. Behind them, the sound of destruction grew louder, chunks of rock dislodging, metallic claws scraping against stone. The air thickened with dust and smoke, making it harder to see. Serafina stumbled, her foot catching on an uneven patch of ground, but Arlen caught her before she fell, steadying her with a firm grip. "Keep going," he urged, his voice strained but resolute. Finally, they burst into a smaller chamber illuminated by shafts of natural light filtering through fissures in the ceiling. At the far end, a narrow opening led outside, offering a glimpse of the forest canopy swaying gently in the morning breeze. Freedom beckoned tantalizingly close, but so did peril. As they sprinted toward the exit, a massive shadow loomed in the fissure, blocking their path. A hulking mech suit stepped into view, its pilot obscured behind a visor that reflected the sunlight like a mirror. The machine raised an arm, revealing a weaponized gauntlet crackling with energy. "Princess Serafina," a cold, mechanical voice intoned. "You are hereby ordered to surrender. Resistance will result in termination." Arlen stepped in front of Serafina protectively, his stance defiant despite the overwhelming odds. "Over my dead body," he growled. The mech tilted its head slightly, as though amused. "That can be arranged." Before either side could act, a brilliant flash of light engulfed the chamber. When the glare faded, a figure stood between them, a woman cloaked in flowing robes adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered like liquid silver. Her presence radiated authority and power, commanding instant attention. "Enough," she commanded, her voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. Turning to the mech, she added, "Stand down." This conflict ends here." To everyone's astonishment, the mech complied, retreating several steps. Seraphina stared at the newcomer, recognition dawning. "Lady Althea," she breathed, awe mingling with confusion. "What are you doing here?" Althea, a revered mystic and advisor to the royal family, regarded her calmly. "Protecting the balance, Your Highness. Though your actions may seem reckless, they serve a greater purpose, one that extends far beyond Eldoria's borders." Arlen frowned, glancing between the two women. "Greater purpose? What does that even mean?" Althea turned her piercing gaze on him. "It means, young human, that your arrival in Eldoria was no accident. Nor is your bond with the princess. Forces beyond comprehension are at play, and you both have roles to fulfill, whether you understand them yet or not." Seraphina took a hesitant step forward. "But why keep it a secret? Why manipulate us like pawns?" "Because truth is a burden," Althea replied cryptically. "And burdens must be carried wisely." Before anyone could press further, the ground trembled violently, knocking them off balance. From above, a cacophony of mechanical whirs and metallic clangs signaled the approach of additional forces. Althea extended her hands, summoning a swirling vortex of energy that enveloped the trio. "There is no time for explanations. Trust me, or risk losing everything." With that, the world dissolved into chaos, the sanctuary crumbling around them as the vortex transported them to an unknown destination. When the light faded once more, they found themselves standing in a desolate wasteland, the ruins of an ancient civilization stretching endlessly in every direction. "Where are we?" Seraphina asked, her voice trembling. "The beginning," Althea answered enigmatically. "And perhaps the end." Far away, in the depths of space, the fleet of alien ships altered course, drawn inexorably toward the same coordinates. Their mission parameters updated automatically, locking onto the signal emanating from the wasteland below. Among the crew, whispers circulated about prophecies and chosen ones, though none dared vocalize their fears aloud. Back in Eldoria, Queen Lysandra received word of her daughter's disappearance via Althea's intervention. Seated alone in her chambers, she gazed out the window at the rising sun, her expression inscrutable. For the first time in decades, she felt unsure, not of her decisions, but of the path fate had laid before her family. And in the wasteland, Seraphina and Arlen exchanged uncertain glances, their hands clasped tightly together. Whatever awaited them next, they would face it side by side, ready to embrace whatever destiny had in store. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks stretched into months. Queen Lysandra sat upon her throne, her regal posture unwavering, but behind her stoic expression lay a storm of emotions. News of Seraphina's continued defiance reached her daily. Reports from spies who had tracked the princess to distant lands, whispers of sightings in remote villages, and even rumors of her aiding rebels on the fringes of Eldoria's borders. Each update painted a picture of a daughter determined to carve her own path, no matter the cost. At first, the queen clung to anger, convinced that Arlen's influence was poisoning Seraphina against her royal duties. She dispatched emissaries, sent elite guards disguised as travelers, and even employed sorcerers to locate her wayward child. Yet every attempt ended in failure. Seraphina always seemed one step ahead, slipping through their grasp like water through fingers. The more the queen tried to bring her home, the further Seraphina drifted, not just geographically, but emotionally. One evening, after yet another fruitless mission returned empty-handed, Queen Lysandra dismissed her advisors and retired to her private chambers. There, surrounded by relics of her reign, the crown she wore sparingly, the portraits of past monarchs lining the walls, she allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. Her gaze fell upon a painting of Seraphina as a child, smiling brightly with flowers woven into her hair. It was a memory so vivid it hurt, a time when her daughter would run to her arms without hesitation, laughter bubbling freely between them. Tears welled up in the queen's eyes, unbidden and unexpected. She had spent years preparing Seraphina for leadership, molding her into what she believed was the perfect heir. But somewhere along the way, she realized now, she had forgotten something vital. She had forgotten how to listen, to truly hear her daughter's dreams, fears, and desires. Instead, she had imposed her will, believing it was for the greater good. And now, faced with the consequences of that choice, She felt the weight of her mistakes pressing down on her chest. Determined to reclaim what she feared she had lost forever, Queen Lysandra devised one final plan. This time, she would not send soldiers or spies. She would go herself, alone and unarmed, ready to face whatever awaited her beyond the palace walls. Her advisors balked at the idea, warning her of the dangers, but she silenced their protests with a single, steely glare. "I am still your queen," she reminded them, "and I will do what must be done." Her journey took her far from the comforts of Eldoria's capital, across treacherous terrain and through bustling marketplaces where few recognized her beneath her simple traveling cloak. Along the way, she heard tales of Serafina and Arlen, how they had helped farmers rebuild after floods, defended villages from bandits, and even brokered peace between warring factions. Each story chipped away at the icy resolve she had carried for so long, replacing it with something softer, warmer. Pride began to bloom within her, not the pride of a ruler, but of a mother watching her child grow into someone extraordinary. Finally, guided by intuition as much as information, Queen Lysandra arrived at a secluded valley nestled between towering mountains. Smoke curled lazily from a small cottage perched near a crystal-clear stream, its windows glowing warmly in the twilight. As she approached, her heart pounded with equal parts hope and dread. What if Serafina refused to see her? What if all bridges were truly burned? Before she could knock, the door creaked open, revealing Arlen standing there, his hand resting protectively on the hilt of his sword. His eyes widened in surprise when he recognized her, but he didn't draw his weapon. Instead, he stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "She's inside," he said simply, his tone respectful yet cautious. Queen Lysandra nodded, stepping over the threshold. The interior of the cottage was modest but cozy, filled with the scent of herbs and freshly baked bread. And there, seated at a wooden table, was Serafina. Her once pristine gowns had been replaced by practical clothing suited for adventure, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders, framing a face that radiated both strength and serenity. For a long moment, mother and daughter stared at each other, neither speaking. Then, slowly, Serafina stood, her expression guarded. "Mother," she said, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "Why are you here?" Lysandra swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. "To apologize," she admitted, the words feeling foreign yet necessary. "I've made many mistakes, my dear. I thought I knew what was best for you, for Eldoria, but I failed to consider what mattered most, your happiness." Serafina blinked, caught off guard by the admission. For years, she had imagined this confrontation playing out differently. In anger, in tears, in accusations hurled back and forth. But this was something else entirely. Something she hadn't dared to hope for. "I don't expect forgiveness," Lysandra continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But I want you to know that I see you now, not as a princess bound by duty, but as my daughter, fierce and brave and full of light. If Arlen makes you happy, then—" She paused, glancing toward him briefly before returning her focus to Serafina. "Then I will accept it. On one condition." Serafina raised an eyebrow, wary but intrigued. "What condition?" "That you come home, not as a prisoner of tradition, but as part of our family. Bring Arlen with you. Let us find a way to unite our worlds, to show Eldoria that love can transcend boundaries." Arlen and Serafina exchanged glances, silently communicating volumes in that brief moment. Finally, Serafina smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up the room. "We'll think about it," she said, her tone teasing but kind. "But only if you promise to stop sending drones after us." Queen Lysandra laughed despite herself, the sound breaking the tension like sunlight piercing clouds. "Deal," she replied, holding out her hand. Serafina hesitated for only a second before stepping forward to embrace her mother fully, the warmth of reconciliation washing over them both. In the weeks that followed, arrangements were made for Serafina and Arlen's return to the palace. Their arrival was met with mixed reactions. Some cheered, others whispered disapprovingly. But Queen Lysandra stood firm, addressing her people with a speech that emphasized unity, acceptance, and the importance of adapting to change. Slowly but surely, hearts began to soften, especially as Serafina and Arlen proved themselves invaluable allies in addressing issues facing the kingdom. Life in the palace was different now. The rigid protocols remained, but they were tempered with moments of joy and laughter. Arlen became an unofficial ambassador between humans and Eldorians, fostering understanding and cooperation. Serafina, meanwhile, found new ways to balance her responsibilities with her personal passions, proving that leadership need not come at the expense of individuality. As for Queen Lysandra, she discovered a newfound sense of purpose. Watching her daughter thrive alongside the man she loved reminded her of the beauty of connection, the ties that bind families, communities, and nations together. Though challenges lay ahead, she faced them with renewed optimism, knowing that love, loyalty, and courage could overcome even the greatest obstacles. And so, under the shimmering skies of Eldoria, a new chapter began, not just for the royal family, but for the entire realm. Together, they forged a future rooted in hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love.